Hello, good evening. Here we are. We're going to finish up the story of Samson. So let's get going. We remember that the last thing we heard about him was that he ruled the Israelites for 20 years. So we're going to pick it up there. One day, Samson went to Gaza. Remember, this is still a Philistine city. Oh, and you know what? Before we start, I want to say one thing. We were talking last night, and I had described to you my interpretation, what I understood a closed womb was. And that's true, what I told you in terms of the cervix being closed so that there's not going to be any fertilization happening. But I want to bring up infertility, which unfortunately many women suffer from. And infertility would be what they called in those days barren, being barren, okay? So just as a side note, you're going to hear both terms. You're going to hear barren, you're going to hear the Lord closed her womb. And, you know, we don't know the particulars of how the Lord did these things, but those are two descriptions of a closed womb as a general statement. Okay, so let's get going. One day, Samson went to Gaza, which we know is Philistine land, where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told, "Samson is here." So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, "At dawn we'll kill him." Now remember, they have a super grudge against Samson because he's really slaughtered their people and taken revenge on them, okay? But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate together with the two posts and tore them loose, bar and all. So he took the bar of the gate, the gates, everything, just smashed them. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Now, I'm thinking that show of strength was because he knew they were lying in wait for him, and he was reminding them of how strong he was and the feats of strength that he had already shown them. And I think it was sort of a spit on their shoe kind of moment where he just broke the gates, the bar of the gate, and just took it all up to the top of a mountain. Okay. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him." So this is a very long grudge going on here. "Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." So that's quite a bit of money for her. So Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You've made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." He said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then with men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the ropes off his arm as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, "All this time you've been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head," I would say 7 braids of my hair, but it says 7 braids of my head, "into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. It must be the pin of the loom. Again she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you've made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. Once again, the more things change, the more they stay exactly the same, huh? So he told her everything. She wore him down. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I've been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as any other man." When Delilah saw that he'd told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines. Now, why is she doing this? Because she's greedy and she wants the money. "Come back once more, he's told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He awoke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he didn't know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes. I don't know how Delilah could stand there and watch this kind of stuff happen to someone she said she loved, right? Gouged out his eyes and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon. That's the god that has the head like a dog, their god, and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain." While they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them, probably doing strength things, I would assume. Excuse me. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. So they were looking down into the courtyard where he was from the roof. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached towards the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than when he lived. You know how strong you'd have to be to push? I mean, have you ever leaned against a stone wall to push 2 pillars that hold up the whole temple, that's holding hundreds and hundreds, maybe even, well, I don't know if there's thousands there, but all the men, the temple was crowded with men and women. It is a temple. It's probably pretty strong, and there's probably quite a few people there. So he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtal in the tomb of Manoah, his father. He had led Israel 20 years. Okay, So let's move on, and we're going to learn about Micah. That's M-I-C-A-H. Now, I've heard it pronounced Micah. I have a friend who's named their son Micah, but most people I hear pronounce it Micah. So here we go. Now, a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse," excuse me. Okay, the reason I mispronounced that is because my mind is wandering. I'm wondering if this is the son of Delilah. I don't know. Let's start this again. Now, a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, no, it wouldn't be Delilah because she was a Philistine, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." When he returned the 1,100 of shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you." So after he returned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith who used them to make the idol. And it was put in Micah's house. I think what confused me is the men who came to Delilah said, "We'll each give you 1,100 shekels." So that same amount was confusing me there. Now, this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod. Remember, that's the breastplate over the apron that the priests wear, but apparently an ephod doesn't have to be a priestly garment. He's making one too. And some household gods, okay, now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods and installed one of his sons as his priest. Okay, so maybe that ephod was made for his son to wear. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who'd been living within the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Micah asked him, "Where are you from?" "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," he said, "and I'm looking for a place to stay." Then Micah said to him, "Live with me and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. I need to read that again, folks. Bear with me. Then Micah said to him, "Live with me and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So the Levite agreed, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. Okay, so it must mean Micah became like a son to the Levite. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. Okay, I'm going to have to look this up. And Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since the Levite has become my priest." I want to just look this up in Enduring Word, if you don't mind. Just bear with me. Judges 17. I just want to understand, because sometimes in the translation it seems like they switch pronouns, or not pronouns, but context change. Okay. Oh, sorry. Enduring Word, Judges 17. All right, so let's just see this last verse here that I'm having trouble understanding. Micah hires an unscrupulous Levite, it says, because this Levite was willing to go in there and honor the household gods. Okay, the man as a Levite had cities to live in and a place established by God for him to minister. Instead, he wanted to do what was right in his own eyes, excuse me, and went about offering himself as a priest for hire wherever he could find a place. So he came to Micah. They crossed paths. Okay, dwell with me, be a father and a priest. Micah wanted this Levite to stay with him and work as a priest. He did this because he wanted to legitimize his personal shrine by having an officially recognized priest serving there. Deep down, he knew his idolatry was false and meaningless, and he hoped that this would make it legitimate. Okay. So here, I'll give you 10 shekels, suit of clothes, your sustenance. So for 10 and a suit of clothes, the Levite hired himself out to the idolatry of Micah. I'm glad I looked this up, because otherwise we would have just passed over it and not gotten the spiritual precept that's being taught here. The Levite was a perfect example of a hireling. In other words, a changeling, somebody who's pretending, a false prophet, a false pastor. Someone who served God or an idol for what it could give him instead of serving to glorify the Lord. Then the Levite was content to dwell with Micah. Micah's consecration of the Levite meant nothing at all. He had no authority from God to declare a renegade Levite as set apart, consecrated by God, to the service of this idolatrous shrine. In this tragic account, each person is guilty of terrible sin, yet we could say that the Levite was guiltier than Micah was. We can say this because the Levite was at least supposed to know the word of God. Yeah. Okay. Micah's confidence was just as false as his consecration was. They were both based on superstition, not on God's word. We can say Micah was utterly sincere, but totally wrong. Sincerity's nice, but gets you nowhere if it's not coupled with truth. A person who sincerely thinks they can swim across the Pacific Ocean will drown just as surely as the person who isn't as sincere. Okay, so now we understand, and that was the end of Judges 17. So let's go to 18. So that was an example. That chapter was a small example of someone who's selling the Lord for money, basically. They're hiring themselves out. They're willing to take a cheap version of holiness for money and sustenance, okay? We're never to do that. And, you know, I was thinking about telling you guys that I'm not going to allow ads to come into any YouTube video I put up there. Now, of course, you have to have like 1 million subscribers to even have them offer to monetize your channel. So I don't know that I'll ever be there. But if I did get there, I would not do it, because to me that's tantamount to selling the gospel, and I'm not going to sell the gospel ever. It's free, okay? I'm willing to read it. Okay. And in those days, so here we go with 18. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zorah and Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. Now remember, these are the people that Manoah and ultimately Samson come from. They said it was the Danites, and these were the areas, Zorah and Eshtaol. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, go explore the land. So they entered the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah, where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, so they turned in there and asked him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? Why are you here? He told them what Micah had done for him and said, he's hired me and I am his priest. Then they said to him, please inquire of God to learn whether our journey will be successful. The priest answered them, go in peace, your journey has the Lord's approval. So the 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw that the people were living in safety like the Sidonians, at peace and secure. And since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also, they lived a long way from the Sidonians and had no relationship with anyone else. When they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites asked them, how did you find things? They answered, come on, let's attack them. We have seen the land and it's very good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take it over. When you get there, you'll find an unsuspecting people and a spacious land that God has put into your hands, a land that lacks nothing, whatever. Then 600, you know, I'm feeling doom coming somehow in this, because they've been blessed by a hireling priest, you know, someone who's in the wrong place at the wrong time, isn't supposed to be there, okay? Someone who's out of order has given them their blessing. Then 600 men of the Danites, armed for battle, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. On their way, they set up camp near Kiriath Jearim in Judah. This is why the place west of Kiriath Jearim is called Mahanadan to this day. From there, they went on to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. Then the 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, "Do you know that one of these houses has an ephod," the breastplate, "some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do." So they turned in there and went to the house of the young Levite at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priest and the 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. When the 5 men went into Micah's house and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They answered him, "Be quiet, don't say a word. Come with us and be our father and priest. Isn't it better that you serve a tribe and clan in Israel as priest rather than just one man's household?" The priest was very pleased. I'm telling you, I know this is going to end poorly. He took the ephod, the household gods, and the idol and went along with the people. So he basically stole Micah's stuff and went off with this group. Putting their little children, their livestock, and their possessions in front of them, they turned away and left. So he took everything, right down to the kids. When they'd gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah were called together and overtook the Danites. As they shouted after them, the Danites turned and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you that you called out your men to fight?" He replied, "You took the gods I made and my priest and went away. What else do I have? How can you ask what's the matter with you?" The Danites answered, "Don't argue with us, or some of the men may get angry and attack you, and you and your family will lose your lives." So the Danites went their way, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned around and went back home. Then they took what Micah had made and his priest and went on to Laish against a people at peace and secure. They attacked them with the sword and burned down their city. There was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and had no relationship with anyone else. The city was in a valley near Beth Rehob. The Danites rebuilt the city and settled there. They named it Dan after their ancestor Dan, who was born to Israel, Jacob. Though the city used to be called Laish, there the Danites set up for themselves the idol. And Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of the captivity of the land. They continued to use the idol Micah had made all the time the house of God was in Shiloh. Something is very, very wrong here, and we're going to take a quick look at what Pastor Guzik says about this. Judges 18. Wow. I don't know that this story is over. All right, let's go down. So the Danites chose a city for expansion, which was Laish. The people there dwelt safely and peaceably. They put together an army of 600. The tribe of Dan adopts Micah's idolatry. Gosh, so foolish. The Levite goes with them, with the army from the tribe of Dan. You know, let's read what he says about this. All right, so when they told the Levite to come with them and to be quiet, it says the Levite's heart was glad because he was filled with mercenary ambition. The Levite didn't care about Micah, only the pay and the status that he might get by being the priest for a tribe instead of just a family. Okay. Okay, bear with me now. What do I have? Okay, the children of Dan just mean the army. I'm sorry. It wasn't Micah's children and stuff. All right. And that's it. I guess we'll see what happens when we get to Judges 19. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. I know there's going to be a big lesson here because God isn't sold for cheap, okay? I love you. You have a wonderful evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.